The verb demonstrare in Latin means to show, and demonstrative pronouns are used to point out or show something. These are words like hic, this, ille, that, iste, also that, even is, idem, and ipse. This video will cover iste, ista, istud, the demonstrative that means that, just like ille, illa, illud, but sometimes in a negative pejorative way. So, kind of like a that of yours, and I'll explain in a little bit. But first, here's the full declension of iste, ista, istud. We'll start with the singular, iste, ista, istud for the nominative. The genitive is istius for all three genders, and the dative is isti in all genders. The accusative is istum, istam, istud, because remember that the nominative and accusative are identical for neuters. And the ablative is isto, ista, isto. The plural forms are isti, istai, ista for the nominative, because remember that the neuter nominative plural is the same as the feminine nominative singular. Istorum, istarum, istorum for the genitive. Istis for all three genders in the dative. The accusative is istos, istas, ista, because remember that the nominative and accusative are identical for neuters. And the ablative plural is the same as the dative plural. Istis, istis, istis. So as with any word with 30 different forms, it can be pretty daunting to look at and even to try to remember it all. Let me go through it one more time with the idea that repetition makes things easier. Iste, ista, istud, istius, 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 isti, 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 istum, istam, istud, isto, ista, isto, isti, istai, ista, istorum, istarum, istorum, istis, 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 istos, istas, ista, istis, istis, istis. But you can also try to relate iste, ista, istud to things you maybe already know. The genitive singular istius is really similar to other demonstratives like eius and huius, other adjectives like unius, and even the relative pronoun cuius. Likewise, isti is like the dative singular ei, uni, and qui. And the ablative singular is much like the first and second declension ablatives, the long O and the long A. The plural is much easier. These are the first and second declension endings, but with an ist in front of them. I, for the nominative plural, orum and arum in the genitive, is for the dative and ablative, and os, as, for the accusative. And how about this? Iste, ista, istud is identical to ille, illa, illud. All you have to do is replace the ill with an ist. And so that's enough for forms. Let's talk about use. Iste, ista, istud is used commonly as just a regular form of the word that, kind of like a synonym for ille, illa, illud. But its meaning can be a bit more nuanced than that. Some grammarians refer to this as a that used in reference to a second person, a you, either a that possessed by the you or even just near the you. Okay, so that's a bit complicated. Let me explain. I was walking in the forum one day and Brutus came up to me looking very disheveled and distracted, not to mention a little blood-stained. I said to him, Brute, cur tu tenes istum pugionem? Why are you holding that dagger? Istum means that, but it's really more like, why are you holding that dagger of yours? Where the istum refers to a that in relationship to Brutus, the man I'm talking to. Cicero wrote to his friend Atticus, De istis rebus expecto tuas literas. I am waiting for your letter about those matters. But since Cicero is talking to Atticus, he's the second person here. The istis is really more like those matters of yours. There's a personal connection with iste, where the that brings up a connection to the you in the conversation. One more example. Ovid writes in his Amores, Quid iste tuus praeter noa carmina vates donat? What does that poet of yours give you besides new poems? Just to further illustrate this, here's a quick list of just the form iste in Catullus' poems. In many of these, the iste comes right before a tuus or wester, words that mean your. And there's another side to iste, though, and you can kind of see it in this Catullus line here. Sophenus iste vare quem probe nosti. That Sophenus of yours, Varus, whom you know well. Sure, there's a bit of the second person in iste here, since Catullus is addressing his poem to his friend Varus, But if you read the rest of the poem, you'll find out that Catullus is actually being pretty mean to Sophanus. He's a poser poet. He's really cool and hip in person, which is in contrast to his really boring and pointless lines of poetry. So Romans sometimes use iste negatively as a way of saying that, yeah, okay, so it's hard to translate literally into English. Sometimes that of yours works well, like that Sophanus of yours, or that brother of yours, iste frater. And one more example of this. Caesar in Book 7 of his Gallic War writes, Animius ista molities non virtus. There is that certain bad softness of mind, not virtue. In summary, iste, ista, istud is declined very much like ille, illa, illud. And both of these words mean that. But iste has a bit more to it than that. It's a second person that, a that of yours, or even a negative that.